Hello and welcome to this Wednesday edition of FreightWaves Now. I'm your host Anthony Smith, and coming up, Mike Baudendistel is going to give us an update for the rail and intermodal side of things. But first, we're going to go to Zach Strickland with the carrier update brought to you by PowerFleet. Stay tuned.
Hey everyone, and welcome to your Wednesday Carrier Update presented by PowerFleet. I am Zach Strickland, and today we are watching the outbound tender volume index push over 12,000 for the first time in its history. So for those of you that are familiar with the outbound tender volume index, it is a base value of 10,000 on March 1st of 2018, which means we are roughly 21% higher than we were on that date. So this time last year, again, almost about 21% higher than we were this time last year, as the index was right around that 10,000 mark, as it traditionally does hover around in early March. Now, we are into mid-March at this point, but seasonally speaking, we should be seeing some volumes increase. Again, the coronavirus has pushed the volumes increasingly higher here over the last week or so, as everybody is starting to have to replenish their shelves due to all the panic buying and also just getting prepared for being in their house for long periods of time. What this has done to rejection rates has done something similar. We have gone vertical on the outbound tender rejection index, getting up to around 12.02% as of yesterday. This is not quite as high as we would see in Christmas. So it looks like we are going to eventually hit that Christmas level of 14.3% or so, where capacity was at its tightest in 2019. We are looking at a pretty sharp increase overall. The rate is not slowing down whatsoever. We did see a little bit of a stalling out over the weekend, but that pace has continued to be quite robust. 12%, about 2% higher than or 2% lower than we were around Christmas. So the rates should not be quite as tight as they were around Christmas just yet, but we are rapidly approaching that period of time. This time last year, 6.72% tender rejection rate. So we are in a dramatically different environment this year versus last year. Last year, of course, we were falling out of that 2018 period where things were increasingly heated, and we were hitting some of the lowest spot market rates of the last couple of years. This year, not at all the same. So capacity continues to tighten on that front. In the United States, where is this happening? So if you look at these dark blue markets, it's in some of the biggest markets in the country. You've got Harrisburg, of course, which has been very active, Atlanta, Dallas, Ontario, Denver, Colorado, of course, getting hit with just numerous winter weather systems coming through and just dropping snow over the mountains, not necessarily in the city itself, but of course those corridors that are coming into Denver, I-70, and then of course just to the north, I-80, making it very difficult for truckers to get through and pick up that freight. Of course, we did have a lot of winter weather in the month of February that has, of course, led to a lot of freight piling up there in general. So not a lot of good travel conditions around Denver, Colorado. Atlanta, though, I want to talk about the Southeast today just for a little while, because this is the area where a lot of the produce starts to pick up this time of year. We've got March, April, May. A lot of the produce comes out of South America, hits Florida. A lot of the harvests happen in Florida. We just had a big strawberry harvest in Florida. This is the single largest producer of strawberries for the East Coast, down there in the southern part of Florida, Plant City, I believe it is. But you see that Lakeland market right there in the lighter shade of blue in Central Florida encompasses Orlando, Tampa area, a lot of farms down there, a lot of orange groves, but also a lot of reefer activity in this area. So we are starting to see a lot more activity in the Southeast, which again, this is the areas that are going to stock your grocery shelves. They're going to replenish all those inventories that we have been seeing decline. So looking at the Lakeland, Florida market, tender rejection rates on the dry van side, it is not simply a reefer market alone, 9.39% right now. Reefer rejection rates up around 17.92%. So both sides of the equation are active out of Florida right now. So any carrier that does go into that market may have a better chance of getting out of there if you are looking on some of those load boards and some of the spot markets. So Florida may not be as much of a backhaul market as you are accustomed to. Atlanta, reefer rejection rates as well, spiking. The interesting thing about Atlanta is the fact that it was hovering pretty stable for a little bit until the last couple of days. So all you reefer carriers out there, get ready. It's coming. So that'll do it for today's Carrier Update.
The comprehensive logistics offerings from PowerFleet cover in-cab ELD, fleet management, trailer tracking, cargo monitoring, and tracking other assets such as chassis and intermodal containers. Power up your operations with PowerFleet.
Welcome to your Rail and Intermodal update. I'm here with Mike Baudendistel. Mike, what do you have for us today?
So the coronavirus continues to disrupt supply chains, of course, and this is a chart which we've talked a lot about the West Coast. We're going to continue that a little bit here. This is outbound international rail container volume from Seattle. So this is a seasonality chart, and you see it decline. It's down in the last week about 35% against the previous year. It also down about 35%, on a 2-year stack versus 2 years ago, level. Seattle took the unusual step recently of shutting 2 of the marine terminals, which is something they had not shut any of the marine terminals in over 5 years, and at least one of those marine terminals is going to be closed every Friday for the foreseeable future. So this is a port that's generally a container port, generally goes pretty much gangbusters with the exception of sometimes right around the Chinese New Year, but this is an unusual step for Seattle. So fewer imports coming in. This next chart illustrates, I thought, one of the better articles on FreightWaves.com recently was written by Joanna Marsh, talking about how some exporters are now having a difficult time sourcing containers. So what typically happens is the import containers come into the ports, and let's say the West Coast, they come loaded towards the eastern consumption centers or the Midwestern consumption centers, and most of those containers return empty, particularly on the international 40-foot containers. A lot of exporters of bulk goods can piggyback on that and fill those containers on the backhaul, as capacity to get some of their products that are exported, things like soybean, scrap steel, those type of things. But this chart is inbound empty rail containers in blue in Los Angeles and in orange in Seattle, and you just see how much those have fallen. So here there's about 1,000 containers a day coming in empty, 40-foot containers a day because of that traffic imbalance. That's gone down to about 200 a day for LA. So there's really just a lack of empty containers coming in, which illustrates how there's shortages in certain places because those containers are coming into LA and Seattle from all over, and so that is causing some headaches for exporters that would normally use that as a way to get their products to market. So the ship sailings also are happening less frequently because of the blank sailings. There are containers being piled up at the ports, which is also causing an issue of getting those exports to their end markets. So it's interesting how that sort of the ripple effect from the fewer sailings has on exporters as well as those dealing in imported goods.
Gotcha. And so with the shutdowns in some of the ports in Seattle and some of these imbalances, what are some of the long-term ramifications? Do you see that's going to be a lot of difficulties of goods getting into that market, or that rates are starting to skyrocket in that area?
Yeah, I think the trucking rates are rising certainly, and the trucking volume is rising. I mean, really haven't seen that yet on the intermodal side. Intermodal is down because there's just fewer imports and a lot of intermodal, particularly international intermodal, but also domestic intermodal. When you think about those transloaded shipments, there's just a lot fewer imported goods. So at some point, there's going to be shortages of certain goods, and really the inventory right now is being drawn down. There's also the question of what are you going to do with the staffing levels at the Port of Seattle? I mean, they have the longshoremen union, those really good union jobs from the longshoremen's union, and what they're really doing now is displacing some of what they call casuals, which are people that are not part of the union and don't work as many hours. So a lot of those people don't have the same opportunities on the employment side.
Got you. And I see you have up here outbound rail volume for 40-foot containers. What's the latest here?
So this is one lane in particular between Chicago and Seattle, which I actually think is a pretty fascinating lane because it's largely it's of course a backhaul lane, Chicago to Seattle, and it's filled with soybeans for the most part, for basically farmers that want to get their products to market in the containers. You can put a bag in the containers and use those for the bulk shipments. But here, it's typically called 125 containers a day, and then the tariffs hit in mid 2018, and you see it drop to almost zero because of the tariffs. Now with the phase one deal to resolve some of those tariff issues, you see it go back basically to the normalized level. But now with the less container availability, you've seen that come down from 175 containers a day to 133. So it's just kind of one thing after another for some of the exporters of bulk goods.
Got you, Mike. Thank you so much. Always insightful. Thank you so much for the update. And thank you so much for tuning in for this Wednesday edition of FreightWaves Now. That's going to do it for today's episode, but we're always streaming around the clock. Our media team is working hard to keep you updated, especially during this time. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.